The year was 1871, and the Wyoming wind had a way of scraping a person clean down to the soul. Dust moved like ghosts across the plains, swallowing fence posts, choking the sun, and whispering in a tongue only the lonely could understand. Out of that wind came a woman, thin, stooped, and half blind from sand, her shawl torn to threads, her boots eaten through. She clutched a single parcel wrapped in oilcloth and staggered toward the faint outline of a gate, the letters McGraw Ranch barely visible through the haze. Her breath rasped in her chest like something burning low. She walked 30 miles since dawn. The letter in her hand was damp with sweat and hope, the last promise from a world that had turned its back on her. A ranch in the Wyoming Territory was said to be hiring a housekeeper. She hadn't known the ranch had fallen on hard times, or that the man who owned it had buried his wife, and nearly his heart along with her. When she finally reached the fence, her legs gave out. She sank to her knees in the dirt, blinking against a swirl of grit. The last thing she saw before darkness came was the shape of a horse, a big bay with a man in a wide hat leaning down. Elias McGraw had seen plenty of strays on his land, coyotes, drifters, lost prospectors, but never a woman like this. Her clothes spoke of hardship, her face of faraway lands. The storm was kicking up fast, and leaving her there wasn't an option a decent man could live with. He lifted her with careful hands and carried her across the yard, his boots sinking into the mud left from last night's rain. Inside the cabin, the air smelled of smoke, soap, and stale bread. 3 small children huddled near the hearth, eyes wide. "Who's that pa?" one asked. Elias didn't answer right away. He laid the woman on the cot, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and studied her face. Even in exhaustion, she held herself like someone who'd known better days. Chin lifted, fingers curled around that parcel as if it contained her life. "She's hurt," he said at last. "Fetch water." By morning, the wind had died, leaving silence thick as grief. The woman woke slowly, eyes darting around the small cabin. Rough walls, a broken clock, children staring from behind a table. Her mouth formed the words with soft accent, careful and polite. "This McGraw Ranch." Elias turned from the stove. "It is... Name's Elias McGraw." She tried to sit, clutching the letter. "I come for work. From Cheyenne. I was told." He held up a hand. "That letter's old. I stopped hiring near a year ago." The words hit her like a bullet. She looked down, shoulders sagging. "No more work." Elias shook his head. "Not much here but hard ground and hungry mouths." The children, 3 small faces so alike they seemed carved from the same mold, peeked from behind their father. Triplets, 5 years old, hair sun-bleached, eyes solemn. Elias caught one reaching for the woman's hand and gently pulled him back. Best let her rest. She tried to stand anyway, bowing slightly. "Please, mister. I can cook. Clean. Washington. You pay little, I stay quiet." Something in her tone, neither pleading nor proud, just matter-of-fact, made Elias pause. He'd known people who begged, and he'd known those who lied, but this woman did neither. She spoke like someone who had nothing left to lose but refused to fall apart over it. Still, a flicker of suspicion crossed his mind. "What's your name?" "Li Mei," she said softly. "From Guangdong. But I worked railroad before. My husband..." She hesitated, eyes flickering toward the window where the wind tugged at the curtains. "He gone." Elias nodded, not asking more. Everyone out here carried ghosts. He poured her a cup of coffee, black and bitter. She took it with both hands, sipping like it was medicine. The triplets watched, whispering to each other. Elias caught only pieces. "She talks funny. She's small." "Pa, is she gonna stay?" He didn't have an answer. Outside, the ranch looked tired. Barn sagging, corral half broken, wheat fields stunted by drought. His last ranch hand had left after the cattle fever hit, taking half the herd with it. Debt collectors had been sniffing around like vultures ever since. And through it all, Elias had tried to raise 3 children who asked each night when their ma was coming back. That evening, when the sun bled red over the ridge, he found Li Mei sweeping the porch with a broken broom. She moved slow but precise, her every motion careful, like someone accustomed to being watched. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I like to be useful," she replied. Her English was halting but sure. "If I stay one night, I should help." He studied her a moment, then said quietly, "You planning to leave tomorrow?" She looked toward the horizon. Just endless dirt and rock. "No place to go," she admitted. "Only sky." Something stirred in Elias then, a weariness that met hers halfway. He glanced toward the cabin, where the children's laughter drifted through the window. "I got a problem," he said slowly. "3 of 'em, actually. Triplets. They need care. I can't pay much, maybe not at all. But there's food and a roof that mostly holds." Lee May set the broom aside, eyes lowering. "You want housekeeper?" He hesitated. The word didn't fit what he needed. "Not just that." His voice dropped. "You need shelter. I need someone who can keep my children alive. I can't offer love, just a fair place to stand. Will you take it?" She blinked, startled by the bluntness. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I will do my best." They sealed the strange bargain with a silence that said more than any handshake could. Within a week, the rhythm of the ranch changed. The children learned to follow her voice, soft as the rustle of wheat. She taught them small words, how to say hello and thank you in her tongue. She patched their clothes, mended their socks, cooked rice when there was no bread. Elias watched from the doorway, arms folded, uncertain what to make of it all. The first time she sang, it startled him. A lullaby in a language he didn't know, sweet and distant. The children leaned against her, eyes drifting shut, and for the first time in months, the house felt like a home again. But not everyone saw it that way. One morning, Elias rode into town for supplies. The general store was buzzing with gossip. A rancher at the counter snorted when he walked in. "Heard you took in a China woman," he said loud enough for all to hear. "What's next, McGraw? Hiring a Cheyenne for a nanny?" Elias ignored him at first, loading flour and nails onto his cart. But when the man added, "Guess you ain't done mourning your wife after all," Elias's patience cracked. His fist landed square on the man's jaw, sending him sprawling into a barrel of oats. "Say another word about my family," he growled, "and I'll bury your tongue where no man'll find it." The room went quiet. No one spoke as Elias paid for his goods and left. He rode back under a hard sky, anger simmering like coal. When he returned, Lee May was tending the garden behind the barn. He didn't tell her what happened, but she saw the bruise on his knuckles. "You fight?" she asked simply. He shrugged. A man said too much. Her brow furrowed. "Because me?" He nodded once. "Folks around here don't always take kindly to difference." She went quiet for a long time. Then she said softly, "Back home, we say, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. But sometimes the hammer breaks first." That evening, the triplets chased fireflies in the yard while Elias repaired a fence post. Lee May joined him, holding the lantern steady as dusk deepened. He worked in silence, but his thoughts wouldn't rest. She was tougher than she looked, never complained, never asked for more. And when she smiled, though it was rare, it carried something healing. As he drove the final nail, a sudden sound split the calm, a high, sharp yell from the chicken pen. "Coyotes!" Elias grabbed his rifle, but before he could move, Lee May snatched it from the rail and ran. Her movements were swift, practiced. She aimed, fired once, and the shot rang out clean. Silence followed. Elias found her standing by the fence, smoke curling from the barrel, eyes steady. One coyote lay still near the coop. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" he asked, astonished. She looked at him, voice flat. "When the world turns on you, you learn fast." He wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her expression stopped him. They walked back together, neither speaking, the air between them heavy with unspoken truths. Later that night, when the children slept, Elias sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Lee May sat across from him, mending a sleeve. He broke the silence first. "You never said much about your husband." Her needle paused midair. "He worked railroad. The men who came for gold. Some kind, some cruel. When fighting start, I hide." He did not. She looked up, eyes gleaming in the firelight. I thought, maybe far place, no more hate. But hate finds road faster than wagon. Elias nodded slowly. You did what you had to. Her lips curved, not quite a smile. And you? You still wear a ring. He looked down at his hand, at the dull band of gold. Habit, he said quietly. Or punishment. Haven't decided which. For a while they sat in companionable silence. Outside, the wind sighed against the shutters, the endless breath of the plains. Then came the sound of hooves. Distant but approaching. Elias stiffened. He stood, went to the window. 2 riders moved along the ridge, silhouettes against the rising moon. Probably drifters, or maybe worse. The west was full of men who took what they wanted and left the rest to burn. Limay rose beside him, peering through the glass. The moonlight caught her face, and for a moment, something like fear crossed it. She turned away quickly, muttering something in Mandarin too soft for him to catch. You know them? Elias asked. She shook her head, though her hands trembled slightly. No, maybe just men passing. He watched the riders fade into the distance, then bolted the door. If they're passing, they better keep on. The fire crackled, throwing shadows that danced across the walls. The children stirred in their sleep, murmuring softly. Limay gathered the mended clothes, folded them neatly, and said, Tomorrow I fix barn roof. Elias nodded. You don't have to. She looked at him steadily. I stay here. I help. This is my home now. He didn't answer right away. The word home hung between them, fragile as glass. Then he said quietly, Reckon it is. Outside, thunder rolled far off, a storm gathering beyond the hills. Limay glanced toward the window again, her expression unreadable. Sometimes the past isn't buried in the dust. It rides toward you, gun in hand. And somewhere out there, the wind carried more than rain. It carried trouble with a name she'd tried hard to forget. But for tonight, the house was warm, the children safe, and the man beside her silent but steady. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe. Tomorrow, she would face whatever the wind brought. Tonight, she belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once. In the home of a widower who had offered her shelter and perhaps, without knowing it, a second chance at life. And outside, the prairie waited, patient and watchful, as all wild things do before the storm breaks. The nights had turned colder on the McGraw ranch. Wind slipped through the cracks in the cabin walls, and sometimes the fire went low enough that the triplets crawled into Limay's bed for warmth. She didn't mind. Their tiny arms felt like a shield against the loneliness she'd carried too long. When the sun rose, she'd light the stove, set dough to rise, and step out into the yard, her breath clouding in the morning chill. Beyond the fence, the land stretched endless, golden grass, broken fences, sky so wide it made her dizzy. Yet even that vastness could not hide a shadow from the past. Elias came in from the barn one dawn with frost clinging to his beard. He poured coffee without a word. Limay watched him, noticing the stiffness in his shoulder, the way he favored his left side. He'd taken a fall off his horse the week before, but refused to rest. She said softly, You should stay inside today. Shoulder not healed. He gave a quiet snort. Cattle won't feed themselves. You cannot help them if you break again, she replied, kneading dough with firm hands. Her tone had grown more confident in recent weeks. She was no longer the timid stranger who'd stumbled into his yard. Elias met her eyes for a moment, then sighed. You sound like my late wife. Limay froze, unsure if she'd overstepped. He saw it and added gently, That's not a bad thing. The tension eased, and she smiled faintly. Then maybe she watch us, tell me what to say. He looked down into his cup, uncomfortable with the idea of ghosts, but something about her words settled in his chest. Since Limay's arrival, the ranch had begun to feel less like a graveyard, and more like a place where life could still take root. The children laughed again. The house smelled of food instead of sorrow. And for the first time since his wife's passing, Elias had begun to imagine the future rather than just survive it. But every blessing on the frontier came with a curse. It was late afternoon when the first sign of trouble appeared, a cloud of dust on the distant road. Lee May noticed it while hanging laundry. She squinted against the sun. 3 riders moved slowly, not heading for town but angling toward the ranch. Her hands went still on the line. Elias stepped out from the barn, wiping sweat from his brow. Something wrong. She pointed. Riders. He shaded his eyes. Probably traders. Lee May's stomach twisted. She'd seen riders like that before. Men who didn't travel for trade, but for taking. She said nothing, only lowered her gaze and went back to the laundry, but her fingers trembled. By dusk, the riders had passed without stopping. Still, she could not shake the feeling that something had brushed against her fate, and would soon circle back. That night, she dreamed of her husband, his body bleeding out beneath railroad ties, his hand reaching for hers as gunfire echoed. When she woke, her face was wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. Days passed quietly. Elias worked long hours rebuilding the corral, and Lee May taught the Triplets songs from her homeland. The boys began calling her Mame, half in jest, half in affection. It made her heart ache in ways she didn't understand. She found herself watching Elias more, learning the rhythm of his movements, the patience in his silences. He was not a man of easy words, but when he did speak, it carried weight. One evening, after supper, they sat on the porch watching the last light fade behind the hills. The air smelled of sage and wood smoke. You've done more for this place than anyone I ever hired, Elias said quietly. I am not hired anymore, she reminded him, smiling. You give home, I give work. That is fair trade. He studied her in the dim light. That's not what I meant. Her breath caught, but before she could reply, a horse neighed sharply in the distance. Elias rose at once, hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. From the darkness came 2 wagons rattling toward them. He stepped off the porch, posture wary. The lead wagon halted near the gate. A man jumped down, broad-shouldered, with a face hardened by dust and violence. Evening, he called, voice rough. Name's Jeb Hanlon. We're traders passing through. Mind if we water our horses? Elias hesitated. The man's eyes were too sharp, his smile too thin. But hospitality still held weight out here. You can water him at the trough, he said, keeping his tone neutral. Jeb tipped his hat. Obliged. Lee May had come to the doorway, her face pale in the lantern glow. When she saw Jeb, the world seemed to tilt. Her throat closed. She knew that face, the sneer, the scar on his cheek. She remembered it under firelight as he tore her husband away from her, remembered his laughter when the shooting stopped. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. Jeb noticed her then and froze, recognition dawning slow and cruel. Well, I'll be damned, he murmured. Ain't you the little China gal from the railroad camp? Elias turned sharply. You know her? Jeb's grin widened. We crossed paths once. Surprised she's still breathing. Lee May's voice trembled. Elias, please send them away. Elias's hand tightened on the rifle. You've had your water. Move on. Jeb raised both hands mockingly. Easy there, cowboy. No harm meant. Just be in neighborly. He turned to his men. Let's go, boys. They rode off into the night, laughter echoing faint behind them. But the laughter didn't fade from Lee May's ears. She sank onto the porch step, shaking. Elias crouched beside her. Who was he? She took a long, shuddering breath. The man who killed my husband. For a moment, only the wind spoke. Then Elias stood slowly, his voice low. You should have told me. I thought he'd gone, she whispered. I thought the past dead. Elias looked toward the darkness where the wagons had disappeared. Out here, the past never dies. It just changes faces. From that night on, the air around the ranch felt heavier. Elias set extra traps, kept his rifle near the door. Lee May moved through the days with her mind elsewhere, flinching at every distant hoofbeat. The children sensed it too, whispering less, clinging closer. 3 nights later, Elias found her in the barn after midnight, sitting on a hay bale, staring at her hands. You ain't slept in days, he said softly. She didn't look up. He will come back. He sat beside her. Then we'll be ready. She turned to him, eyes searching. You would fight for me? For this? I'd fight for what's mine, he said simply. Her breath caught. Am I yours? He looked away, jaw tightening. This ranch is my life. You're part of it now. That's all I know how to say. It wasn't a declaration, but it was enough. For the first time since her husband's death, Lee May felt something solid beneath her feet, a sense that she wasn't alone in the storm. The next day, she showed Elias how to rig a tripwire across the main path and dig shallow trenches that could trip a horse. He watched her with a mix of respect and worry. You sure you're not part soldier? She smiled faintly. War makes soldier of everyone. While they worked, the triplets played in the yard, chasing a dog that had wandered weeks ago and never left. Their laughter carried across the field, light and pure. Elias found himself watching them, his heart twisting. They called Lee May Ma May now without hesitation. The name sounded right, like something that had been waiting to happen. That evening, as the sky burned orange and violet, Elias and Lee May shared supper alone. The children were already asleep, worn out from play. The quiet between them felt easy for once. Elias poured 2 cups of coffee, passed one to her. I used to think the worst thing in this world was being alone, he said. Now I think it's forgetting how to trust. Lee May nodded. Trust is hard. It means you give your life into someone's hands and hope they do not close their fist. He studied her face, the way the firelight softened her features. And you? You still don't trust me? She hesitated. I want to, but trust is not built in one season. Before he could answer, the dog began barking outside, low, frantic. Elias rose, rifle in hand. The bark turned to a snarl, then a yelp cut short. Lee May ran to the window. Figures moved beyond the fence, dark shapes against darker night. Get the children, Elias said sharply. She sprinted to the bedroom, waking the triplets with urgent whispers. Down quick, hide. She led them to the cellar trapdoor beneath the rug and pushed them inside. Stay quiet. No sound. She kissed their foreheads, her hands trembling. Outside, Elias fired a warning shot. This is McGraw land. Turn back. A voice called from the dark, mocking. We just come to finish old business. Cowboy, you're harboring a woman owes us a debt. Lee May stepped beside him, face pale but steady. It's me they want, she said. I go, they leave. The hell you will, Elias growled. You think I'll hand you over to scum like that? The attackers fired first. The sound cracked through the valley, sharp as lightning. Elias pushed Lee May down, returning fire from behind the porch rail. Splinters flew. One bullet struck the doorframe inches from her head. When silence came, it was heavy and short-lived. Jeb's voice echoed again, closer now. You can't hide her, McGraw. She's got blood on her hands, same as me. Lee May whispered. He lies? I never. I know, Elias said, eyes fixed on the darkness. Doesn't matter what he says. He's not leaving here alive. The standoff dragged through the night, broken by gunfire and the shriek of wind. The moon dipped low, painting the land in cold silver. Lee May reloaded cartridges with steady hands, passing them to Elias. Her fear had turned to something sharper, resolve. Near dawn, the gunfire stopped. The riders pulled back, regrouping beyond the ridge. Elias leaned against the wall, breathing hard. They'll come again when light breaks. Lee May tied her hair back, eyes fierce. Then we finish before sun rises. He looked at her, struck by the quiet steel in her voice. You sure you're not afraid? She met his gaze. I've been afraid every day since I came to this land. I am tired of fear. Outside, faint light crept across the plain. Elias handed her his spare rifle. Their hands brushed, a spark passing between them. Not desire, but something deeper, forged in fire and shared peril. When the first rays touched the horizon, they took their positions. He by the barn, she by the porch. The wind carried the smell of smoke and the promise of violence. The riders came again, 6 of them this time, Jeb at the front. Elias cocked his rifle. Stay low, he murmured. Lee May nodded, eyes locked on the approaching threat. The triplets huddled silently below, unaware how close the world above was to shattering. The riders fanned out, shouting, firing into the air. Bullets tore through the fence, splintered the porch posts. Lee May answered with a shot that dropped the first man clean off his horse. Elias hit another, reloading fast. The fight had begun. And as the sun rose blood-red over the Wyoming hills, the line between survival and surrender blurred. The widower rancher and the Chinese bride stood shoulder to shoulder against the ghosts of their past, their fates tied now not by words, but by the smoke curling between them. The final echo of gunfire rolled across the plains, leaving only silence, and the certainty that when dawn fully broke, the world they knew would not be the same again. The morning broke slow and gray, the sky a smear of cold ash over the jagged teeth of the mountains. The ranch was still, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Only the wind stirred, whistling through the eaves, rattling the shutters like a ghost come knocking. May rose before the sun, same as always, but there was no peace in her rhythm today. Her hands trembled as she lit the stove. The smell of coffee filled the room, rich and bitter, mingling with the faint scent of the baby soap. Behind her, Daniel sat at the table, hat in his hands, shoulders heavy. The firelight cut lines across his face, carving out the wear of a man who'd carried too much loss for too long. "You sure about this?" May asked quietly. He didn't look up. There ain't much choice left. Jenkins won't stop till he gets what he wants. And I won't have him talking this land or touching you. Her fingers stilled on the pot's handle. She turned, her dark hair catching the light. "Then let me stand beside you." "You already are," he said, finally meeting her eyes. "You keep this place alive. You keep my boys safe. That's the only fight that matters now." Outside, one of the triplets started crying, a thin, wobbly wail that split the silence. May moved to tend to the baby, but Daniel reached out, catching her wrist. His hand was rough and calloused, his grip firm yet trembling. "If anything happens," he said hoarsely, "you take them. Head east of Fort Collins. Sheriff owes me a favor there." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "You speak like a man walking into death." He managed a small, broken smile. "Out here, death walks with every man. The trick's making sure it don't take what you love with it." She swallowed hard, pressing her hand to his cheek. "Then promise me you'll come back. I cannot lose another home." He didn't promise. He just leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Keep the fire burning." By noon, the storm clouds had gathered low, bruised and heavy. The men who came up the ridge brought with them the smell of dust and gunpowder. Jenkins rode in front, his slick grin sharp as a knife under the brim of his bowler hat. "Well, ain't this a picture?" he drawled, pulling his horse to a stop. The mighty Daniel Harlan, hiding behind a mail-order wife and a few brats. Daniel stepped out from the barn, rifle slung low. "You got a real short memory, Jenkins. Last time you tried stealing from me, you left 2 fingers in the dirt." Jenkins' grin widened. "And I brought 6 men to make sure I don't lose a rest." The air crackled, thunder rolling somewhere beyond the hills. May watched from the window, clutching one of the babies to her chest. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Daniel's stance was solid, steady, but she could feel the weight of it, the inevitability in his eyes. The first shot split the air. Then came the chaos. Gunfire tore through Quiet Valley, echoing off the rocks. Daniel dropped behind a trough, firing clean, measured shots. 2 of Jenkins' men fell before the rest scattered toward cover. Horses reared, screaming. May ducked as a bullet shattered the window beside her, glass flying like she set the baby down and grabbed the shotgun from above the hearth. Her hands shook, but she loaded it anyway. She wasn't going to hide while the man who'd given her and her children shelter bled in the dirt. Outside, Daniel reloaded, heart pounding. A bullet grazed his arm. Hot, searing pain. He bit back a curse and kept firing. Jenkins' men were circling, one moving up behind the shed. Then he heard it, a faint cry. May's voice. "Daniel." He turned just as she burst through the door, dress torn, hair whipping in the wind. She fired once, the shotgun's recoil jerking her shoulder back, but the blast hit true, sending a man spinning into the mud. "Damn it, May!" Daniel shouted, "Get back inside." She ducked behind a barrel, reloading. "Not without you." The storm broke then, hard rain slashing through the air. The dirt turned to mud beneath their boots. Jenkins' men pressed forward, yelling over the thunder. Daniel fired again, one down, two left. Jenkins ducked behind the water trough, shouting orders. A flash of lightning lit the yard, and for a moment everything froze. Rain falling like silver needles, gun smoke curling slow and ghostly. Then came the final charge. Daniel saw the glint of steel too late. Jenkins had moved around the side, pistol raised. The shot tore through Daniel's shoulder, spinning him back. He hit the ground hard. May screamed. She ran to him, dropped to her knees, blood spreading beneath him like spilled ink. Jenkins stepped closer, gun aimed steady. "Should have sold me the land," he sneered. "Now I'll take it off your grave." But May was faster. She fired the shotgun from the hip. Too close, too desperate. But the blast caught Jenkins full in the chest. He stumbled back, eyes wide, the pistol slipping from his hand before he collapsed into the mud. The silence that followed was heavy. The rain hissed. The thunder rolled away, and the smell of gunpowder clung to the wet air like sorrow. Daniel tried to sit up, gasping. You did good." She pressed her hand over the wound, her tears mixing with the rain. "Don't speak. Please." He smiled weakly. "Ain't much to say. Guess the Lord still has use for a stubborn fool." Behind them, one of the babies began to cry again from inside the house, small, helpless, alive. May turned, torn between fear and hope. "Go," Daniel whispered. "See to them." She shook her head, refusing to move. "Not without you." He coughed, wincing. "You remember what I told you? Fort Collins. The sheriff will help you." Her breath hitched. "No, you'll help me. You'll ride with us." But his eyes told her the truth long before his voice did. "May, I ain't got another sunrise in me." The rain softened then, as if the sky itself was listening. She bowed her head, sobbing quietly, forehead resting against his chest. "You gave us a home," she whispered. "You gave me hope." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand trembling. "You gave me something I thought I'd buried with my wife." Lightning flickered far off. The hills blurred into mist. When his hand went still, May stayed there, holding him until the cold began to bite. By morning, the storm had passed. The world smelled of wet earth and smoke. The triplets slept soundly, bundled in quilts near the hearth. May moved to a quiet house like a shadow, her movements slow, deliberate. She packed what she could, blankets, food, the small carved horse Daniel had made for the boys. Then she stepped outside. The sky was clear and possibly blue. The land stretched wide before her, golden in the dawn light. She buried him by the lone cottonwood overlooking the valley, the wind whispering through its branches. There was no preacher, no song, just her voice, soft and steady. "You were the first man to see me," she said. "Not for what I was born, but for what I tried to be." She knelt, pressing a small charm, one she carried from China, into the earth above his grave. "For luck," she murmured, "for the road ahead." When she mounted the wagon, the triplets stirred but did not wake. She took one last look at the ranch, the broken fence, the barn doors swinging in the wind, the porch where Daniel had once stood watching the sunset with that quiet, worn smile. As she flicked the reins, the wheels began to creak over the muddy path. Each turn felt heavier, slower. The ranch shrank behind her, swallowed by distance and dust. By the time she reached the ridge, the valley was nothing but a blur of light and memory. She stopped the wagon there, unable to go further. For a moment, she thought she saw him, standing by the cottonwood, hat in hand, watching her go. She blinked, and he was gone. The triplets whimpered softly, and she whispered to them in Chinese, her voice trembling but tender. "Your father was a good man. He fought for us. We will make him proud." She turned east toward the long road and the rising sun. Days passed. The trail was rough, the cold biting. At night, she huddled close to the children beneath the stars, whispering stories of the land that had both saved and broken them. She spoke of rivers that sang, of mountains that guarded secrets, of a man who taught her that love could be built from dust and kindness. By the time she reached Fort Collins, her hands were blistered, her clothes worn, but her eyes, those dark, unyielding eyes, still held fire. The sheriff took them in, as Daniel had promised. He asked no questions, only nodded when she spoke the rancher's name. He was a good man, the sheriff said quietly. This town won't forget him. May bowed her head. Nor will I. That night, when the babies slept, she stepped outside. The town lights flickered below, the wind carrying faint laughter and the smell with smoke. She lifted her face to the sky, the stars like scattered tears above. In that vast silence, she whispered, "You kept your promise, Daniel. You gave us shelter. Now I'll give them a life." She didn't cry. Not then. But as dawn broke and the first light touched the world, a single tear traced down her cheek, slow, shimmering, unstoppable. Far away, the cottonwood tree bent gently in the morning breeze. A lone bird perched on its branch, singing a song soft as memory. And maybe, somewhere beyond the horizon, a man's voice answered, carried on the wind, "Keep the fire burning, May." She smiled through the ache. And she did.